Welcome, everyone.
Did you start?
Pardon me?
Did you start?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we started. Okay, so welcome. For the folks on YouTube that might be looking in, if we lose you suddenly, it's because I forgot my power cord. But I think I've got enough juice, so we should be good to get through the evening. So, at any rate, trying to keep up with everything. I'll tell you, there's just so much going on right now that it's kind of difficult, and it's going to require that I just devote more time and just try to focus on key issues as we go forward. So tonight, what we're going to do is conclude with our look at Israel, and I think the big question that probably a lot of people have, I know I did for the longest time, but now I think it makes a little more sense, is why is it that Israel, the Jewish people, are so hated? And we're going to go through that and hopefully get a look at it. Awful lot out there on the internet right now, and I happened to start watching today. I picked up on it from Tom Hughes, had a presentation yesterday, and he was talking about this fellow that's from Silicon Valley. And there's a presentation that's done. It's on YouTube. And I just picked up on the first maybe 15 minutes of it or so, and I think it's probably about a half hour. It's a slideshow, and he gets into a lot of things. I'm not sure he's a believer, but he gets into a lot of things that I think are of interest to people that are paying attention to biblical prophecy. A lot of things about how we're being tracked. I mean, I was shocked when I listened to this, the number of cameras that are out there right now tracking us and using facial recognition, and how everything is just headed toward the beast system. But if you're interested, I wrote down the title, and you can just put it in your, in your internet and look for it. It's Silicon Valley Whistleblower, SMART in capital. It's actually quote SMART, capital S, capital M, capital A, capital R, capital T, end quote, cities worldwide. If you put that in there, you'll come to this presentation. It's pretty telling. This is a fellow that he's no slouch. He's an electrical engineer. He's got a degree in computer science. He's worked in Silicon Valley, or he worked in Silicon Valley for 25 years, and has been spending a lot of time studying just what's going on with a lot of this technology. Smart cities. I don't know if anybody's heard about that, but they're coming. They're a new big thing, and I, Shirley and I were talking about it on the way over. I know that Bill Gates is planning to build one in Arizona. He purchased like 24,000 acres. These are going to be super modern cities, 80,000 homes, complete retail and schools and medical facilities and hospitals, and it's all going to be self-run through technology. The key to it, though, is that they're planning to build other cities throughout the country, and ultimately be all part of what they call the matrix, which is, I kind of get the sense is like a central staging center, and how we're rapidly moving toward the time when they're going to track everything we do, and it's coming. And the question is, does it happen before, is it implemented before the rapture or not? I mean, that's the big thing. So I think that we're going to continue to see things unfold, but again, as far as all the bad stuff, Patty, is concerned, you're good?
Oh, I'm not concerned.
Right.
God's in control.
Yeah. So
The
the bad stuff that's concerned, I think we're going to escape most of it.
Well, I'm concerned for those who are not believers.
Oh,
that are
absolutely.
Good family and friends.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
So I am.
we need to be telling people about Christ. I mean, that's the only
Gotta
way
write
to
rapture
escape.
letters.
Pardon me?
Got to write rapture letters.
That's a
in case
good
I'm
point.
not here.
Rapture letters, leave
It wasn't
books.
an alien that took
Yep.
me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's true.
good point.
Bob, I'm gonna share something. Today I was at McDonald's I was reading the book Revelation by John Walber. Did a bunch of commentaries on it. And a bunch of Jehovah Witnesses came in. And my first thought was to put away the book.
Oh.
But I didn't.
Good for you.
And one of them said to me, "Oh, you're reading Revelations." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Is it the Bible?" And I said, "Yes." And she quoted a scripture, but went, "No, Father." And I thought, there's my chance. And I said, I go to a prophecy class. And the three women looked at me strangely, but before they left, they said, "We're going to think I'm coming.
They're gonna, what?
Think I'm coming here."
Really?
Wow.
So, that's Jesus working.
Yeah, right, right.
Wow. Yeah, but they're gonna come here and try to convert us. They have a mission.
But we gotta believe,
Yeah,
that if
yeah,
they hear
yeah.
the word, just like they try to change people, maybe them in here, they'll hear the word.
Right.
Exactly.
You don't know.
Maybe I'm way off, but that's the
Oh,
way
that's
I look
good
at it.
point.
Sometimes
That's
it's Jesus working.
Yep.
All right, so a couple of articles, and the first one I got in the mail, and it's from Hillsdale College, if anybody's familiar with them. And the author of this article is a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Tucker. And just to put his credentials in perspective, he's the founder and president of the Brownstone Institute, I'm not sure what that is, and a daily columnist on economics for the Epoch Times. From 2017 to 21, he served as editorial director of the American Institute for Economic Research. He's written several publications, including the Wall Street Journal, National Review, the Freeman, and Chronicles. He is the author of 20 books, including Liberty or Lockdown. And I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's kind of long, but it's kind of interesting in terms of what's happened over the last couple of years and the impact of the lockdowns. And I think in retrospect, we can all look back and say probably the worst thing that's ever happened to this country were the lockdowns and what it's doing to the economy. And the evidence just speaks for itself. I mean, you don't even have to take a position. It was kind of crazy. But I'm not going to read everything, but let me just go through some of the highlights. It seemed to be widely believed in 2020 that the best approach to pandemics was to institute massive human coercion, a belief based on the novel theory that if you make humans believe or behave like non-player characters in computer models, you can keep them from infecting one another until a vaccine arrives to wipe out the pathogen. The lockdown approach in 2020 stood in stark contrast to a century of public health experience in dealing with pandemics. Given the failure of quarantines in 1918, they were not employed again in 1918 was the Spanish flu, I think it was, and because of quarantines, a lot of children particularly died, and so it had a very negative impact. Given the failure of quarantines in 1918, they were not employed again during the disease scares, some real, some exaggerated, of 1929, 1940 to 44, 57 to 58, 67 to 68, 2003, 5, and 9. In all of those years, even the national media acted responsibly in urging calm, but not in 2020. When the policymakers, whether due to intellectual error, political calculations, or some combination of the two, launched an experiment without precedent. The sick and well alike were quarantined through the use of stay-at-home orders, domestic capacity limits, business, school, church shutdowns. This occurred not only in the U.S. but worldwide. Needless to say, the consequences were profound. Coercion can be used to turn off an economy, but given the resulting trauma, turning an economy back on is not so easy. This is why 30 months later we are experiencing the longest period of declining real income since the end of World War II, a health crisis, an education crisis, an exploding national debt, 40-year high inflation, continued and seemingly random shortages, dysfunction in labor markets, a breakdown of international trade, a dramatic collapse in consumer confidence, and a dangerous level of political division. Meanwhile, what happened to COVID? It came anyway, just as the best epidemiologists predicted it would. It had a highly stratified impact, consistent with the information we had from the very early days. The at-risk population was largely the elderly and the infirm. To be sure, almost everyone eventually came down with COVID with varying degrees of severity. Some people shook it off in a couple of days, others suffered for weeks, and many died. Although even now there is grave uncertainty about the true number of COVID deaths, due both to faulty PCR testing and to financial incentives given to hospitals to attribute non-COVID deaths to COVID. Even if the lockdowns had saved lives over the long term, and the literature on this overwhelmingly suggests they did not, it would be proper to ask questions at what cost. And I'm not going to get much more into that. But for one thing, the lockdowns kicked off an epic bout of government spending. So therein lies the source, primary source of inflation that we're experiencing today. COVID response spending amounted to at least $6 trillion above normal operations. That's just fresh new money. Running the national debt up to 121% of GDP. So GDP is your total economy. And 121% of that went toward, or now goes toward, the national debt. Percent of GDP. For comparison, our national debt in 1981 amounted to 35% of GDP, and Ronald Reagan correctly declared that a crisis. The Federal Reserve purchased this new debt with newly created money, nearly dollar for dollar. From February to May, the total money supply increased by an average of $814 billion per month. That's just new money that's printed and put into the economy. So the money supply reached a staggering 27.5%. At the same time, as one would expect in a crisis of this sort, spending plummeted. Since a severe decrease in spending puts deflationary pressure on prices, regardless of what happens with the money supply, the bad effects of printing all this new money were pushed off into the future, and we're experiencing that now. The explosion in money supply has resulted in the highest inflation in 40 years. And this inflation is accelerating, at least according to the October 12, 2022 Producer Price Index, which is more volatile than it's been in months and is running ahead of the CPI, a reversal from earlier in the lockdown period. Most nations in the world follow the same lockdown strategy while attempting to substitute government spending and printing money for real economic activity. The Federal Reserve is being called on daily to step up its lending to foreign central banks through the discount window for emergency loans. It is now at the highest level since spring of 2020. The Fed lent $6.5 billion to two foreign central banks in just 1 week this October. The numbers are scary and foreshadow a possible international financial crisis. Back in the spring and summer of 2020, we seemed to be experiencing a miracle. State governments around the country had crushed social activity and free enterprise, and yet real income was soaring. Between February 2020 and March 21, a time of low inflation, real personal income was up by $4.2 trillion. It felt like magic, but it actually was the result of government stimulus checks. Initially, people used their newfound riches to pay off credit card debt and boost savings. And the month after the first stimulus, the personal savings rate went up from 9.6 to 33%. And then jumping down a little bit, after the summer of 2020, people started to get the hang of having free money dropped in their bank accounts. So by November, the savings rate had dropped back to 13.3%. When the Biden administration unleashed another round of stimulus in 2021, The saving rate at first nearly doubled. But fast forward that to the present, and people are saving only 3.5%, half the historical norm dating back to 1960. So it's kind of like, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And so the chickens are coming home to roost. The credit card debt is soaring even though interest rates are 17% and higher. In other words, all of the curves inverted once inflation came along. This is one of the biggest head fakes in the history of modern economics. The pandemic planners created paper prosperity to cover up the grim reality that they have brought about. And it goes on and on and on. We know pretty much what the rest of it's going to say. But I would go a bit further and say that this was contrived. And you read the World Economic Forum, they're coming right out and they're not even hiding their bias anymore. And they're coming right out and saying that this last 3 years has been a testing period. And people are basically doing exactly what we thought they would do. And so, and then it goes on to talk about 100,000 restaurants in Manhattan that have closed, and small businesses, and and then you get into some of the other things that are happening. We'll talk about like, the World Economic Forum and what they're doing, and ESG, and just all of these things that are just leading toward. It has to lead toward a collapse. But what it is, all this stuff is just a precursor to the beast system. We're heading toward the time, as evidenced in Revelation 13. Let's just go to Revelation 13 real quick. Revelation 13. And this is familiar, I think, to most of us. We all have heard this before. But this talks about the beast coming out from among the sea, out of the sea, which is generally a reference for the nations. So it's talking about the Antichrist and the false prophet. But if we go down to verse 11 of Revelation 13, John, the revelator, the one who's given this by Christ himself and by the angels, said, then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, which is kind of peaceful, which would indicate probably a religious leader, but spoke like a dragon. So this is a reference to the false prophet that will be around during this period of time. We'll be gone, but we're not going to be here to see the false prophet or the Antichrist. In fact, in 2 Thessalonians, it very clearly says that the Antichrist cannot be exposed or identified until the church is gone. So it exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven in the earth in full view of its people. So this is probably pretty early into the second half of the tribulation, when which is what Jesus referred to as the Great Tribulation. This is when things are going to get really bad, particularly for Israel. Because of the signs, it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth. And deception, Jesus is so quick to remind us in the Olivet Discourse to be careful of deception. Let no one deceive you. And you read about that throughout the initial, or throughout the New Testament. And I would suggest that we are in the midst right now of some of the most profound deception I think any of us have ever seen. And when we get into this study about Israel in just a moment, I think we'll see that it's satanic. And there's a lot of satanic influence being exercised. When you see things that are taking place that are just so totally illogical, and I won't go into mentioning all of those, I think we know what those are. you just have to just shake your head and say it has to be satanic, because nobody in their right mind would do some of the things that we're watching unfold in this country and throughout the world. Down to verse 15. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. So what we have here is a picture of basically what Daniel referred to, what Jesus referred to as the abomination of desolation.